Ooh, I almost fell out the stool. Damn. Hey guys, remember how I made a video last week-ish and I said that I would never talk about diversity or problematic stuff again because I was tired of talking about it? Today I got something way more pressing to talk about. Hey guys, it's Francine Simone, and I am back with another diversity video, kind of. It's about bad representation. As most of you know, I've been on hiatus since like August because pregnancy, don't want to read no books, Accordimus and Fury put me in like a reading slump. I had to DNF that bitch because problems. So anyways, I know a lot of people love that book, and maybe one day I will talk about it. I probably won't read that shit again. Sorry, but like it just wasn't working for me, and so I DNF'd it. But I've been reading some since then, and I did get contacted by a publisher like in October to read a book, and you know what? I really like the way that they solicited me, so I was like, you know what? I'll give it a try. It's not necessarily something that I necessarily review. It's not YA. It's an adult book. It's kind of like reminds me of those, like not like a Dan Brown kind of book, but this one featured like diverse sets of characters. Like the guy is biracial. He's in Egypt. And, like, it was supposed to be, like, some Egyptian mysteries. And I was like, ooh, that sounds cool. Like, we going tomb hunting? Like, you know, I was over here, like, preparing to be Laura Croft and shit. And so there was romance in there. And I was like, this bitch is always down for a little romance. Like, you know me. So I said yes. And then I read it. And then I got 62% into that bitch. And I was like, nope the fuck no. Now I'm going to be basic for a minute. So please don't take offense when I use this word. To like as a non-medical term, but this bitch was triggered like on the for real, my mind was fucking violated. I literally almost went back on every motherfucking word I said in my last video. I was gonna go on Twitter. I was going to do a motherfucking rant. I was going to talk about the author in some kind of ways that might not have been kind. I was going to subtweet and tag some people in it. I was just like, I was pretty motherfucking irate. I woke my husband up in the middle of the night. He literally rolled over and I was like, hon, are you awake? And he was like, silence. And I was like, you awake? And he was like, yeah. What's up? You know, like I literally woke him up in the middle of the night and I was like, bruh, I had to DNF this shit. I couldn't do it because X, Y, and Z happened and I just fucking revolting. I just know. I was no way prepared for this. There's nothing in the synopsis that leans towards this. There's nothing even in the previous text that really would suggest this. The content, sure, but the graphic way that it was written, no. And I was just like, I need to talk to you about this. Like, I was motherfucking triggered. Like, my husband, I was actually telling him this. And because he watches all my videos, he literally texted me. I'm just going to, like, leave a little text right here. And, like, he's being the last. Like, this bitch is triggered. Like you, fuck you. But seriously, I was. So I want to talk about my experience with this. I was going to make this video into, like, how bad representation happens and how we can fix it. It was going to be, like, a tip thing. And then I was like, no, because that's not what's really bothering me. What's bothering me is that this is the first time it's happened in such a violent kind of way. Like, I DNF stuff all the time. Guys, I DNF more books than I review. Like, let's be legit. Like, you know how I only have, like, a few reviews a week? Like, I can go through 10 books in a week and only read, like, 3 to completion because I'm just like, no. No, waste of motherfucking time. 30 pages into that bitch and you didn't even give me a lot of time to hate you. You just like, hate me. Like, that's usually my reading experience because I'm so critical when I read. But when I say I've never been affected like this by a book, it's because I've never really come across this topic the way that it was written. And I'm going to get to this. I'm not just going to be like, you know, funny with it. I'm going to tell you guys what the book is about and all this stuff. Just give me a second. But I've never been affected this way by a book before. So in my last video, I felt like what I said was true. However, I did not know how hard it was to implement it. So let me just tell you guys about this book. First off, disclaimer, I'm not going to tell you the title of the book, and I'm not going to tell you the author of the book. I mean, you can probably find it. I mean, like, just look at my social media. It's not a fucking secret. However, I would prefer not to give it that much attention, especially since I know it's not a book that we generally, as a community, would pick up and read. It's a very niche style book in a very niche genre. And I think especially most of you, after reading a few pages, are going to be like, no, this book isn't for me. Anyways, so now into the book. The book is set in Egypt. It's set in two different time periods, in 1951 and like 27 years later. And it's in the perspective of two people, majority-wise, for the most part. And then it goes into like a third perspective towards the later half of the book. The biracial son of an Egyptian woman, the actual Egyptian woman, and kind of a villain-esque character who is an antagonist to both the woman and her son and the woman's like daughter. So it starts in modern day America, like 1970s something. 78, I guess, with this guy. He's fresh out of college, so he's like 22, 23, 24. His mom has cancer. She's about to die, and she reveals that he has a half-sister that she left in Egypt before he was ever even born. And so he's like, I gotta go to Egypt, gotta find my sister. And he goes. And it's like a huge mystery who she is, where she is. All he knows is her name and approximately her date of birth. And that's about it. And so he's going, all these like kind of thuggish shit's happening to him because he's in like the slums of Cairo. It's depicted as very dirty, is very crowded. The guy notices that like this birth rate of this country is high as fuck because everybody's having kids. It's very stank. There's lots of like tobacco smoke. It's like hashish or something. However, from the guy's perspective, it was very dirty, very like crime-ridden place. I had issues with the beginning of this book because he's not really done well. He's biracial. He's American-Irish, and his mother is Egyptian, so he's half Egyptian. But he doesn't know anything about Egypt because his mom didn't tell them anything about her past life. Like, she was like, clink, 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 clink. Like, nobody was going to know what happened to me in my past life. Like, so she didn't really assimilate to American, like, lifestyle or anything like that. So she's like, and, like, he had this obsession with Egypt, but he did not actually portray the real cultural insecurities that people who are biracial or people who grow up with two conflicting cultures actually do. He was this, which was essentially like a white hipster dude who's like super self-important, knows big words, and thinks he's like almighty and smarter than most people. You know, the kind that like goes to a different country, and just because he's like studied about that country, he thinks he knows more about that country than the people of that country. I've met a lot of those in Japan. Anyways, he was that kind of American guy. And I was really confused because it seemed like he completely was white. Now, the author is white, so that's where some of these issues are stemming from. Here's where we get to own voices. His mother's perspective was like the same thing of the son's perspective of Cairo. That it was dank, it was dirty, it was slummy, it was, like shady and shisty. Like, the way she saw it, there were even some exact phrases used to describe things that the son did. And I thought that that was very wrong of the author, because what anybody knows is that a native who grows up in a country does not and will never see that country the same as someone who is not native, someone who is a tourist at that point. I think it boils down to the fact that if you're going to write a culturally based story, you have to be, one, highly educated in that culture, and not just educated, but highly intuitive about cultures and about how people react in cultures. And even then, you have to be 100% completely sure of your ignorance. You have to know your ignorance, because when you don't, that's how you fuck up. The author never took into consideration her culture, which is funny because it's like, how can you write a story based in Egypt and not take into consideration the different cultures that go on? He completely skipped all of that and was just like, thriller, baby. And I was like, oh, the fucking popcorn. No. So it felt a lot like it was fetishized. It was a bit offensive at times because the woman turned into a husk. She was a belly dancer. And she ended up having an affair with the king. The king was like, he was going to get abdicated soon. He was all into pleasure and greed. And he was all about corruption. And he hated his country because they were corrupt. I mean, there are some things that the book got right. Like racial tensions between people who were of European descent versus African or Arab descent. There's lots of racial tensions there. Now, getting to it, all of the main characters in this story were either light-skinned, green-eyed, or of European kind of descent, or dark and Araby. And you could probably guess which ones were seen in the sympathetic light versus an antagonistic light. Exotic land for the experience and enjoyment of the Western audience. It's like being able to see the dark side of humanity by actually looking at darkies play it out. Like, it's the most fucked up thing. So that's kind of like what was happening in this book as I was reading it. And it was mainly because of bad writing. I don't think it was intentional. It was bad writing. Like, these people were becoming husk. His mom was a belly dancer, and it was in a casino, and the king was like, yeah, we're going to do it. So, like, there's these uncomfortable sexual situations because she's also 18, which I thought was a bit gross, but I'm rolling with it so I can get through this book, right? And the guy who's like antagonistic is kind of like the king's like pimp. That's kind of how he's described. And he sexually assaults her, then kind of threatens her, and then he's very derogatory towards her. He like insults her, calls her all sorts of horrible sexist names, all sorts of stuff while she's having sex with the king. Like, she gets into this affair with the king, then she ends up pregnant, and she tells the king, and he's like, well, I'm getting married, so bye, bitch, deuces. In a roundabout way, she tries to get back into belly dancing. She has a daughter, but she gets kicked out of there because, baby's crying. Isn't that great for, like, belly dancing shops? And then so she tries to tell her story, to get her story and put in the paper, to discredit the king because, like, there's whole, like, revolution is happening, which the political stuff, like I mentioned in the book, was all right. It was just really misplaced because it was like a political book, but it was told through a own voice experience, which wasn't own voice. Problems. You see what I'm getting at here. And then, like, the book, I told you guys earlier, the book was sold to me as a romance, right? There was romance, mystery, and adventure. Like, I'm thinking the guy's going to be, like, climbing the pyramids, looking for shit, getting chased by ghosts of the past, And, like, he's going to, like, kick it with some woman that he met, maybe, like, I don't know what, right? Turns out the romance that's happening is between him and a 17-year-old girl, like, that's obsessed with him in this weird kind of way. It just really was sinking. And it was just weird, and I was just like, okay, well, you know what? I'm judging these people to the writing because the writing's not that good. The narration's bad. And then I get to the worst part of the book. Now, the guy who I said it was, like, sexually assaulted the mom and, like, was saying sexually derogatory things about her. He, like, tells her that he loves her at one point in time, and she's, like, completely like, no, I think if you, like, camel dung, like, get out of here, right? So I'm like, okay. After the king gets, like, kicked out, he, like, finds her, kills the guy that she's staying with who wrote her the paper, wrote about her in the paper that, like, toppled things. He kidnaps her and her kid. He gives her kid off to, like, this, like, area where children are essentially abandoned. And guys, okay, so I want to warn you here because this content is highly disturbing. So if you have any type of triggers with rape or with, like, children stuff, you might want to stop here. I'm going to put a little time link here that tells you when I jump forward. But I'm going to talk about something, the part that, like, highly disturbed me and that I was just almost made me go back on everything I've ever said. So fast forward in time, I told you he, like, kidnaps he kidnaps the woman's daughter, gives her to these people, and he's, like, raising her up for this. And we don't know what happens to the girl or anything like that until we get to his perspective. Now, he's, like, this really deplorable, like, evil kind of guy. All he can think about is greed and stuff like that. Again, terrible characterization because he's literally the dark Arab guy. We get to this guy's perspective. And then, so we find out all of these things about how he farms these children and stuff, as if that isn't bad enough. Like, contextually, I get it. Okay, they rip the baby from the mom's arms and gives her over, and she's probably going to grow up to be one of these girls. Like, okay, like, I understand that, right? The part where I had to completely stop, and I was just so fucking disgusted, was not only do we see that the girl, it makes it to 11, that she's being taken to do this. Not only do we see that, but the act is graphically depicted for like a page and a half. And not only is it graphically depicted of essentially child rape, it's written in a more erotic tone than not. Now, guys, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a sensitive reader. I'm not somebody who gets upset over content. Like, I understand that child rape and sex slavery and all that sort of stuff exist. And I know that rape exists. I know that it happens. I know that these are terrible fucking things that happen to children all the time. However, To put it in a book is okay because it's a part of reality. So to talk about the content, that's content. To graphically depict it, now that's gray area, because is it necessary to graphically depict someone being raped in a book? Sometimes we see that on TV, and we say that it's okay, for instance, like Game of Thrones. We've seen that happen multiple times on that show. But to graphically depict it from the villain's perspective and to add an erotic tone to it, I'm sorry, but that's child pornography. That's kiddie porn, and that's fucking disgusting. So I know this is a highly extreme example because this is not just offensive to me, but it is I felt violated for a good few hours. I couldn't sleep well last night. I kept dreaming about how angry I was. I didn't dream about like what I read. Like, it's not like it stuck with me. Like, I'm reliving the images in my mind or anything. I'm irate. So I kept thinking about it, thinking about how I talk about it today. And guys, it literally made me I was going to go on Twitter. I was going to rant about it. I've said and thought some very judgmental things about the motivations of the author because of that, which I'm not going to share here. Those are my personal thoughts. But I just wanted to say that I completely understand how the impulse to do that is so strong. To completely drag it the fuck out of a book when you were pushed to the point that I've just been pushed to. But it made me realize how important it is to think about it before we go out and hype a book for that particular instance. So I want to point out that there were a lot of issues leading up to that book that had terrible bad representation. I mean, I just spent the whole video like telling you guys about every like big instances where that was. There were a lot of smaller stuff. I mean, it was just all over the place. And I was just going to read it and review it. I probably would have given it like a 1 star. I finished it without any of that, like the shit that made me fucking put that down. If that was like not in the book, I probably would have finished it. And it would have been 1 or 2 star because it's bad representation, because of all the bad writing, right? So I think it's important that we think about it and we analyze it and realize why it's problematic and where the problematic issues are. But I ultimately want to say I understand. And I just want to let you guys know that I've had that experience. I get the hate. I get the anger. I get the disgust. I get all of that. I got it before. But now not only do I have to talk the talk, but now I have to walk the walk. You know, like before, I had never been pushed so far to the point where I would have done that. I have just been made angry, but I've never been made so repulsively irate that I don't even have the words to describe it. And y'all know this bitch talks a lot. And so I just had to get that off my chest because I know if anything, you guys understand since you're my book people. So I guess that's it. I hate to leave on this note. It is so like depressing, right? Like I feel like the whole, like everything in my house, like, even though like the sun just went down and it's like all dark and it's gloomy and that is not my MO. Okay, so let's take all that negative energy, throw it out the motherfucking window with the book. Like, I need a book suggestion. You know what? In fact, okay, guys, like in the comments down below, leave like a book suggestion of a nice YA book, fantasy, sci-fi, whatever, just not contemporary. I don't want to read contemporary. Of something that you just loved, your favorite fucking book of the last year, of this month, whatever. Your most favorite prized book that I can check out to read and hopefully get me out of this like terrible reading slump. I mean, I've been in a reading slump since August, and then I pick up that shit. Like, I really feel like I'm being fucked by the reading gods here. As always, if you like the video, hit subscribe. If you guys have any questions or any thoughts for me, you can always find me on Twitter. I'm always there, lurking like the creepster that I am. And I will talk to you guys later. TTYL, ta-ta for now. Bye!